Kia ora and welcome everyone to today's webinar on fresh perspectives on food technology planning. I will open with a karakia for our session. Mauri ora kia mātou, arahina mātou ia mātou mahi. Kimihia he huarahi mo te kaupapa o te mātauranga hangarau. Awhina atu, awhina mai. Te pau e here nei ia mātou. Hui e, taiki e. It's a real pleasure to introduce our speaker today, Heather. Heather brings a wealth of experience across food technology and hospitality, having taught from year 7 right through to year 13 over the past 16 years. She holds a Bachelor of Consumer and Applied Science from the University of Otago, a postgraduate diploma in community nutrition, and an endorsement in secondary education. Alongside this, she has chef qualifications from Otago Polytechnic and valuable commercial food industry experience. Heather is deeply passionate about food technology education that is grounded in the New Zealand curriculum. Her programs are evidence-informed, thoughtfully sequenced across levels, and designed to offer diverse and meaningful learning experience for ākonga. Currently teaching at intermediate level, Heather works within a tight time frame of just 12 hours per class each year, something that has sharpened her planning practice where every minute truly counts. In today's webinar, Heather will share insights from her journey, focusing on flexible planning approaches that balance curriculum requirements, diverse contexts, delivery methods, and teacher wellbeing. She'll also offer practical tips and strategies for managing a typical secondary teaching load. Heather is still very much on the journey herself, and I know you'll take away something practical and valuable from her experience. Welcome, Heather. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Pip, and thank you for having me on. It's a real privilege to be able to connect with teachers who I'll probably never meet. And I just hope that hearing something from my journey helps others who are still on theirs. It's never over. I'm just going to give you some brief insights into why I plan the way I do. And I recognize that we're all different, and that's what's so great about teaching. Everybody has got something to offer. We've all got different strengths and interests, and apart from always keeping the curriculum in mind, Treaty of Waitangi and your school's requirements, I think that we're very fortunate in New Zealand that we can interpret the local context and bring the curriculum to life in a way that's meaningful for us. Just waiting for my slide to change. Is it going to change, Pip? Thank you. So I'm just going to say the technology whakatauki, which I think has a lot of meaning. So kawa e rangi ruatia te hapai o te hoe, e kore tō tātou waka e u ki uta. Don't paddle out of unison or our canoe will never reach the shore. So for me, that means that teachers try and stick to the guidance from the Ministry of Education, which is evidence-based on the New Zealand curriculum. I know there are teachers out there who've been teaching for 30 or 40 years. I've only been 16, and you know it back to front, but I refer it back to it quite often to keep me on track. And I see myself as being on a waka with every other food technology teacher in the country, trying to give students a core collection of skills and advance them as learners. And I say to students when I used to be in Dunedin, look, you could end up working in Auckland, or you could move and you could go to a school in Wellington, and hopefully it wouldn't be difficult for those students to just slot into those learning. So we all use the curriculum document and we all use the Treaty of Waitangi. And some of us are subject specialists with big degrees, lots of industry experience. Some people are teaching technology in early childhood. I know someone who upskilled from an early childhood teacher and is now teaching food technology in a secondary school. So we're from all over the place, all trying to bring the curriculum to life, and we're all working hard. And what's wonderful about it is that we do support each other, which I think is really good. I've had to rely on that a lot over the years, support from other teachers. Just waiting for this little transition. So here is a little bit about me, just a brief pepaha. Kia ora, tēnā koutou. Ko Mount Cargill, te maunga. Ko Oriti te awa, I have Southland connections, nor Otapoti aho. So I've lived in Dunedin most of my life, but now kei Otautahi, toku kāinga e Nainei. So I live in Christchurch now. Ko Annabelle, rātu ko Claire, oku tamariki. So I have two daughters, Annabelle and Claire is just about to have her first child, which is super exciting this week. Ko Heather, toko ingoa. I've met some of you at different conferences and workshops, which is nice. I'm just going to skip over this because Pip has already gone through that, but I feel very lucky to have a diverse background, which I always think nothing's ever wasted. You know, sometimes you spend a lifetime accumulating all sorts of different experiences, and you can always draw on your background to bring to life your new context. So I didn't train to be a teacher until I was 50, but I'm actually quite grateful for that because of the life experience that I have. But today I'm just going to run through quickly some reasons as to why I plan the way that I do. I think everybody's got a different journey and ends up in teaching for different reasons. You know, you could have decided from when you were 5 years old that you wanted to be a teacher, or you could have fallen into it like I did when I was older, and it's turned out to be perfect for me. I'll go through some of the core elements I always refer to when I'm planning anything. So it doesn't matter whether it's a huge curriculum shift coming from the Ministry of Education as it is at the moment, or whether it's because management have decided that we need more of an emphasis on something, or you know, perhaps you're at a new school and they have a different philosophy of teaching from perhaps what you're used to. I always fall back on these core elements. And it's important that the elements result in a coherent, evidence-based program of learning that's engaging and accessible to all learners. We all know they've got to be culturally relevant so that every child feels valued and comfortable, and that we should be advancing the learner from their starting point. So this is where national standards is going to generate some discussion, because hopefully there won't be the assumption that everybody is starting at the beginning of level 3 or level 4 or 5, when actually testing reveals that they're at the start of level 1 or level 2. So we've still got to be careful about that sort of thing. And I've found that there are wider applications and benefits from that approach to planning. I like to teach the whole child, and I find that my approach to planning helps me look around the child so I can have a holistic view of them, no matter what their age is. So I didn't complete my Bachelor of Consumer and Applied Science until I was 50, and I took 6 years to do it while I was at home. I went into a school in Dunedin that was called a liberal school because we accepted all the students nobody else wanted, children who were really unique, quirky little thinkers. And I loved that school because everybody mattered and everyone belonged. But it was a little bit stressful because they ran the high trust model and they just said to me, you're the teacher in charge, make it your own. And I thought, okay. It took me 2 years to find my feet, but I did have a generous budget and I had a wonderful foods technician. So it was all good. But that's what it felt like when I was a beginning teacher. It didn't matter what age you are, it's always scary at the start, but you've just got to jump in and get going. So what helped me was that I feel I had terrific teaching at the Otago College of Education. So elements that I use in my planning come directly from my teaching there, and I still am very grateful to my educators. I know people who say, oh, you don't have to do what they tell you at Teachers College, but you really do. You know, that has kept me on the straight and narrow, and I feel that that's a large part of who I am today as a teacher is because of the good grounding I got there. Because I didn't really know a lot and didn't have any colleagues, I was the only person in the South Island at the time teaching senior food technology. There were just no colleagues at all. I practiced responsive teaching, so I just had to try things and then pivot really quickly and change if something wasn't working. And to help me with that, I used mini cycles of inquiry to investigate and trial new initiatives. So, you know, when you start, you get a lot of advice, and I used to test that advice and do little mini cycles of inquiry. So, Sometimes that would be across a class, sometimes it would be one student or a group of students. It might be across a year level, and I'd do them really quickly, so just over 2 or 3 weeks with one class. Investigate a problem that I was interested in what was happening. At one point, it was me. People were saying, "Oh, you've got to use digital tools, digital this and digital that." So I did a mini cycle of inquiry to test whether digital tools actually gave me better outcomes for students rather than students using pencil and paper. And I actually decided to go back to pencil and paper because it was more successful. But because I had data from that, I could say to people, well, yes, that's right, I do use Google Forms and I do flip the classroom a lot, but actually I prefer using paper because of this. And I could show them the difference between the two ways of doing things for me. It took me a while to find my people, those lovely people in the community who are your foods mentors, and a lovely, welcoming local cluster group. And in my cluster group, nobody taught senior food technology, but they made me so welcome. I'm still friends with so many of them, and I just love them. For the way that was so accepting of me because it let me feel that I still had permission from my peers to be a little bit different and it didn't get in the way of having friendships. Because we had no textbooks, we all get a bit tired because we are generating resources from scratch. It's changed a little bit now. TENS has stepped into the space, which is amazing for hospitality, Service IQ, HSI, Glasshouse, all the different Ringahora, all the different iterations of that over the years have been very helpful with resources for hospitality. But really, I had to learn to use the internet as my main professional development source. If I wanted to know how to do something, I'd actually just type into Google, how do you do blah, blah, and it would take me to a site, an education site. So in the early days, I used Teacher TV, which was out of the UK, and I think it rebranded as TES. And they were full of these incredible videos of teachers teaching food technology. The UK does it really well. And even today, I'm still on fantastic Facebook pages. There's some really great New Zealand ones. I'm on a STEM one in the States. I use Facebook with Edutopia from the States, which is brilliant, and some really good Australian ones. So there was no limit to anything I could try, but I still tried to plan in a way that was still sticking to the levels of the curriculum, but where the students had fun and I had fun as well, but where I could still track how they were going. So that it's not just all about fun. I only ever cooked once a week. In the other 2 or 3 classes, I've always done theory, but tried to teach the whole child from their starting point with that. So I've always had a big emphasis on literacy and numeracy, despite, it's coming to the fore a little bit recently because some of the PISA data and some national testing is showing that, maybe in some places, New Zealand children are slipping back a little bit. We need to get cracking. But I'm comfortable with the changes coming through because I feel like I've always had that focus. And I've always included service aspects to things like units. So I love it when the children do something for somebody else. That's how I was brought up. I still do service in the community myself. Our school's very lucky. We have a lunches charity, Full Bellies in Christchurch. They're amazing, and we're just about to start baking for them. We've done baking for the men's emergency night shelter. We've made jam for Women's Refuge. I know lots of people will be doing this in their classrooms as well, and I just think the benefits for the students about thinking about somebody else while they're following the technology design process to make that food is so good for them, especially those young ones who've had perhaps a disrupted start to life and they've got their heads down a little bit. They actually feel really empowered when they can do something to help someone else. So, we all know manaakitanga, and we use food to just to do something for somebody else and to show some araha. So I use the briefs in food technology to also cater for a diverse range of cultures. So I tried to keep the briefs quite open. And from year 10, I've always used a choice rubric. So I know that Wendy Slatter and Joyce use choice rubrics a lot. I've looked at theirs and they have hyperlinks on their Facebook page into resources, which is very generous of them. I'm a big fan of choice rubrics because if you have a, a 4x4 one, you can control the constraints and some of the context. You can keep it manageable. And I always used to leave 3 gaps so that if the student had a random idea that they always wanted to make, then they could do that. So I always remember this boy, and he had some learning issues, and one of them was part of his spectrum was he had fixed thinking, and all he wanted to make was garlic powder, and he could make it. It was fine because everybody else was making their own thing as well, and they always come up with cool things that you've never even thought of. So these are the sorts of things that I always do when I'm starting planning, and I check to make sure that I am doing them. Um, I, I've not been that person. I'm not much of a language person myself, so I'm a bit light on using te reo. Like I have te reo words on things like the sugar and the flour, greetings coming in, ka pai, those sorts of words, but I'm not very strong on phrases yet. I am doing some work myself, but I've always tried to plan with the 3 principles of protection, partnership, and participation. And if you keep the briefs very wide, and you make sure that the goals are attainable, that the resources are there, and that there's a negotiated outcome, and that people are working within their range with a bit of challenge, you can meet all of those 3 principles. And to make sure that I was doing meaningful work, because I used to see a lot of people rushing through the year, half-finished workbooks, teacher burnout, sort of having to hurry kids along. I decided I was going to do less work, so fewer units in more depth. And then I could plan for repeating cycles of skill development. So they're practical skills. So equipment comes back, the safe hand position comes back, but also their skills as a learner. So, can they do critical thinking? Can they problem solve? Can they anticipate what they need before they need it? What are their group work skills like? All of those things. And I just found that classes really settled and they bought into it. I like children to feel calm and happy and safe when they come into class. They don't always enter that way, but by the time they left, I'm sure you're all doing it as well. Those kids are leaving pretty relaxed and happy and feeling very capable and competent. So, because of those, there's several threads that I felt I was always having to draw together, like about 5. It was just a bit overwhelming thinking, oh gosh, how am I going to remember all of this every time? I was lucky enough to talk about it with a young PE teacher one day, and she showed me her lesson plan template because PE teachers have got so much to do as well in a lesson. And she used to use the left-hand column with all her compulsory elements, and that was a reminder checklist. So the first column had those things, and then over on the right-hand side, I would just write what was happening in the class. That ticked off that element, and over the years, I've dropped a couple of things and am able to add in extra things. So sometimes it can be a reminder, like at my school at the moment, we give out tokens for PB4L, School-Wide Positive Behaviour for Learning program. So I can pop into that left-hand column tokens, and it just reminds me to do something like that. Um, we've all got to show progress, how the learners have progressed, and you have to have a base reading for that. The holistic view of a child doesn't really extend to not having any data. So I've always, when I meet a child for the first time or at the beginning of the year, I assess their prior learning. So assessment doesn't always mean a test. I would read their pastoral care notes, I still do, read the dean's notes, go and talk to them if I need to. Sometimes give them a little short test, and that might be on vocab or true or false, or have gaps in a sentence and have the words at the bottom. And then the tests give data. So just write some brief notes about the students and keep the result of any tests, and then redo that at the end of the year or at the end of a test, at the end of a term, and then you can show some movement. And what's helpful there also, and lots of you will already do this, is to have marking rubrics and have the rubrics aligned with the levels of the curriculum. So that if it's a level 3 and you're doing characteristics of technology and the curriculum says what they should be able to do in that, then you have got that in your marking rubric and you are designing activities that will feed back into the marking rubric, which feeds back into the curriculum level, and that should be crystal clear about where everybody is. And I wouldn't be tempted either to mark children too lightly, because if they go forward and they are told that they're at level 4 and they're actually just at the beginning of level 3, that's really bad for their self-esteem. And the next teacher doesn't have a true view, or at the next school doesn't have a true view of what they're actually capable of. So sometimes we're under a bit of pressure to give some good data when it's not actually appropriate. But if you've got the evidence sitting there, it's not personal. You're just making a snapshot of where the student is and how they've progressed, and they will have progressed. So always back yourself and have confidence. I used to like student voice as well. We have to get student voice. There's a few different ways of getting that. Google Forms are quite good if every student's got a Chromebook, because you can aggregate the data and get bar graphs or pie graphs, that kind of thing. But I usually give out a student feedback sheet at the end of every unit, and it's just got a sliding scale from 1 to 5. And I always put other or comment underneath every section. So there's usually about 5 sections, and I insist that they write a comment, because otherwise you've got no idea why they've given you that mark, like a 1 or a 5. And just watch out for the students who, if 1 is needs a lot of improvement and 5 is excellent, that they don't get them the wrong way around. So just to check that. And I used to do a little summary for the students and read the summary back to them. And I would use the findings to improve the units. And I would tell them that that's what I was going to do. So, out of all the chaos of starting teaching, that's how I felt I could keep a handle on what I was doing and why. And I could look at whether or not it was working. So the pluses of planning like that, because I do change, I don't have folders and folders in an office where you just pick up term 1, 2005, and then repeat it in term 1, 2006. I've never done that. Um, I had to get used to pivoting quickly, and so that's just become my way of working. So if students are interested in something and we're going to go down a little bit of a rabbit hole with it because they're interested, then I go. So I'll tell them, look, I can see that you're interested in this. Would you like to know a little bit more about this? And we have a vote. So if it's overwhelming, most of them do, then I say, well, look, we'll just pause what we're doing this week for 2 days, and I'll go away and get some things ready for you, and we'll come and we'll investigate. So come back with some activities and some theory knowledge and some more slides. And I find that keeps interest up, and they respect the teacher, because you're not working on them, you're working with them. So you're making a little bit of time to actually follow their interests, no matter how random they are. And the most random one was with Year 10 doing a food safety unit, and they were on fire about molds. They loved molds. We grew molds. They wanted to know why they were all different colors and different sizes, and why did some grow at different times. And I said, do you guys love molds? So we actually did 2 weeks on molds. It was the funniest thing. So I had to go away at night and read up on all these molds and design these jolly experiments and go online and find things. But it was such fun, and it was very, very satisfying. So that built strong relationships with the students, because they were involved in some of the planning. And I think that's really cool. And often those ones who, are slow to engage or a little bit shy, they start opening up and they realize that they can have some sort of impact on what the program will be. So I've always been quite used to seeing increased attendance. You know what it's like when you take foods, you're often given the tail. I mean, of course, they are comfortable when they come into a foods room. It's a very familiar domestic environment. They relax, but when they relax, they're open to learning. So that's another reason why I'm very careful to try and give them what I think they will respond to, and find out if they are, and if they're not, then change it somehow. So my markers for that, how do I know that's working? Our attendance goes up, engagement is high, like discipline issues just melt away, they just don't happen. Achievement goes up, and I tell them, you're finding this too easy now at whatever level, I'm going to take it up a level. So next week when you come in, I will expect a little bit more of you, but you will be able to do it. So I'm a big believer in self-efficacy and self-belief and encouraging children to be brave and just jump in, just have a go, and I'm here to support you. And they really do respond. They just need you on their side, don't they? So just some plus that there are some a lot of the pluses of the planning that I've done kind of up until now. In the first 2 years, I did 10 to 12-hour days as well as 4 hours on a Sunday. I thought, oh my word, when does it start to get easier? And it did eventually because you build up this massive base of resources and experience. And what I loved about the fact that I had developed them all was that they were personal to me. So I just got to know them all very well. And I developed this system whenever I started a unit that was based right back at what I used to use at the start. And I could do them a lot more quickly. Um, it was really hard realizing there was nobody in the South Island at that time teaching senior food technology because I've always loved that program. But I did find some people in the North Island who helped me at the University of Waikato. There's always somebody, the Crest Challenge, the Royal Society Crest Challenge. Those people are amazing. Competitions are great because you get to meet other teachers. But the only feedback I had was my own from reflections. I am a reflective practitioner and from the student feedback surveys. So um, that's kind of why I do my thing, and sometimes why it is hard for me to work with other people. And I understand that it's really hard for the other person. I haven't quite worked that one out. But what I had to decide was, look, I'm just not going to wait to be perfect, and I'm not going to wait for the perfect department or the perfect program. I'm just going to do it myself. You've got to back yourself. So I kept going with the same planning techniques because they worked. They were taught from an evidence base by excellent people at the Otago College of Education. Um, I had to rely on myself for 6 years. I had freedom and independence, but by doing those reflections, the regular mini cycles of inquiry, which I still do, and by seeking regular student feedback and then quickly acting on what I saw, I could get rid of things that didn't work and I could quickly try something else. So that might suit everybody. It does take a bit of work, but you do get quicker at doing it and you have to pivot less often because you're using more experience. So now I feel lucky because I'm used to gathering data. Some people aren't or they don't like it, but I see it as being very useful. But I use data in a way that's useful for me. So I always do what the department wants, but I also do my own stuff to gather data. And it means I can show it to people and I can justify why I do what I do, and I have confidence in what I am doing most of the time. But I use the same tools as everybody else. I use unit plans, lesson plans, and I don't do a lesson plan for every lesson. I find weekly outlines are helpful because I have columns that have resources. So that will include things like the food order, equipment, whether or not you've got a foods technician helping you on a particular class. Um, I still use the student feedback surveys. I've got a really good food order sheet and a master sheet. And I know there are some really good programs now where you can use digital food ordering and aggregate the columns over the year, which is really cool. One of my main tools for planning programs is to go right to the end and go back. So I look at if I was in a high school, which I'm not at the moment, I'd go to the year 13 programs and have a look at what they should be able to do by the end of year 13 for food technology. And then I track it back through the years and I do my planning back through the years. So I use that every now and again when there have been changes just to check that what I'm doing, because I don't do different things every year, is still relevant. So at the moment, because I'm teaching year 7 and 8, they're going on to year 9. I've become more familiar with the year 9 program, and I tell the students in year 8, if you can do this year, you will be able to do it next year. You will be successful at high school because you will do this again, but you will just do a bit more of it, and it might be a little bit harder. And I've had students coming back from the high schools they've been going to and saying, Miss, they're giving us what you gave us, and it wasn't hard. And other students hadn't had it, and they were finding it harder. So that pathway, that transition from one level to the next, should be as clear as crystal to the students, and the threads should go through as smoothly as possible. And that works really well if you happen to get stuck with multi-level classes as well, because you've got the same threads going through. So you could have a really bright year 11 who's working at the same level as a year 12, and why not let them sit the year 12 units? It also cuts down the amount of work that you're having to do in a multi-level class. I've had year 11, 12, and 13 technology in the same room with year 11 hospitality. It gets a bit crazy at times, but you have to think smarter about how to conserve your energy levels, and planning carefully through the strands can help you do it. And everything should build on the next level, on what's gone before. So when I think about planning, I don't just plan for content. The classroom culture is so important. If you've got a good classroom culture, you've got kids who love coming to school. What are we doing today, miss? You remind them about what they did last time, and then you feed them forward. When you come next time, we're going to be expanding on this. Don't forget it. It's going to come back. Involving them, talking to them as though they're real people. And I look for a focused, relaxed vibe. So I never do anything just for fun. There is always learning behind it. And that's why when I do the whiteboard, on the right, I have what is happening for them today. And on the left, I always have the key competency for the day, and it might be managing self if they've been a bit unsettled. I always have a learning outcome, which will mean something like most students will show an improvement in understanding instructions that they are reading, and then they will act on that. And so I will just observe to see if that's happening as the learning outcome, and I'll tell them that at the end. Look, guys, I've been watching you to see if you can read instructions and then do what they say, and you have been. One or two of you are struggling, but I'll help you next time. So part of having a relaxed focused vibe is to have really strong entry and exit, to have things in the same place all the time, to have your routines about the laundry, about sanitizing tables, all of that should be the same every week. Make sure the bottles are always topped up, that the cloths are always clean. Give them a welcoming, clean, well organized environment, and they are not allowed to put anybody down, especially as a joke. Everybody belongs. They need to be kind and helpful, because somebody will be kind and helpful towards them. And then they start to relax and they have more of a willingness to try. And resilience starts to come in. They're not going to back off because something went wrong, or stop doing something because they think someone's watching them. They just keep going. And the big one for me is that they read instructions and do what they say. And sometimes I put that up as the learning outcome, that you will read the instructions and then do what they say. It's also important that they ask for help, and that when they do ask for help, I come quite quickly. And there has to be safe behaviour, so there's no silly behaviour with knives. You must use the pot mitts. It's not just them that they need to keep safe, it could be somebody else around them. So I'm not going to go through all of this. The slides are going to go out. So these are the sorts of things I incorporate when I'm planning. So hopefully people can read that for themselves. So I build in opportunities for service. We do games, so fun games at the start or at the end, and the most popular one, weirdly, is 20 questions. They absolutely adore it and they request it. So that just means one of them comes up the front and they look at something that's in the room, and the others get 20 questions to guess what it is. And it's honestly so popular. And they love word games on the board and the choice rubrics. So they're quite nice for teacher creativity. If there's a new sort of technology or a new fad that comes in, you can, why couldn't you have something like Taylor Swift flies all around the world, and she's going to have Lord over for a sleepover on their birthdays. What could be their birthday cake? And so they might, imagine some of them will do that, or make it a more kind of a boy-friendly one. I don't know, what is it called? The Super 8 cars are on at the moment, or there's boys who go hunting, tap into their interests and give them something to do. Like after the mosque shootings down here in Christchurch, a really popular one was design and trial a digital cookbook for people from Muslim heritage who were now on their own, because so many of the women were by themselves. And the level of compassion coming out of kids for those people was just fantastic. And they went down these beautiful learning journeys about, what sorts of recipes did they make. So I was speaking to other students at school to find that out. And where do you buy the ingredients? And would you like to cook more Western food? And it was just such a lovely thing. So I also sometimes randomize students when they come in to work in pairs if I find there's a little bit of friend disruption going on, or there's a gender imbalance. There's boys on one side of the class and girls on the other. I'll tell them, but I find they love being randomized as long as you tell them beforehand, and those are the benefits that I've seen from it. Diversify the assessment. So as soon as they hear the word assessment or test, they often freak out and shut down. So in technology, we use mostly formative, and we do observation to see if they're meeting the achievement objectives linked with the matrix. And, who knows what it's going to look like in the future going into materials and processing. But I wouldn't imagine that those sorts of things would change, like the content might change, but there still should be a matrix, and there should be explicit examples of what that looks like. Um, I find they respond really well to sequencing. So they do this, and then they do that, and then they do this. And that's the technology design process. So a workbook that's got steps to follow, those are the sorts of things in it. One of my cycles of inquiry about 6 years ago was, I thought, oh my goodness, I'm not sure how they're all going. So I decided to slow them down. And when they had mastery at one step, and I had written down what mastery would look like, then I let them progress, whereas the whole class was progressing at once. But I didn't really know if all of them had mastery at the time. Like they can kind of look as though they do, but how would I know? So I changed my workbooks, and I had a teacher sign off at the stages where mastery had to be seen. So it was the work in their books and what could they say to me and what had I noticed. And that was really, really effective at identifying students who looked as though they were doing the work or looked as though they understood something, but they really didn't. And so they had to stay at that level until the work got to the right standard. And once they realized that there was going to be no wriggle room, they worked a lot better, or I could actually have really great learning conversations with students. And then they felt so proud of themselves when they could go on. And usually there was a really good, authentic learning experience at the end. And it could have been something like invite your favorite teacher for lunch, because they really, really wanted to, but the planning had to be super good for that event to go off well. So that was another little way that the cycles doing an inquiry cycle helped me, was to refine my workbook use, and I could ditch some pages and expand on others. We do fun things, you see things on TV sometimes that you can modify. You could do something like the Great British Bake Off, whatever it is, and then auction the food when you invite parents in. I used to do Dragon's Den. So if they were doing an innovative food product, they could do it in a small group or pairs or single, and they had to make a pitch to the rest of the class from the hot seat. And the class had a template where they could give constructive feedback, and it wasn't like The Biggest Loser, nothing horrible like that. They gave constructive feedback, and then everybody voted. It was almost like doing ranking. You do a PMI, which is positive, minus, and interesting. And then you rank the best ideas and take the top three. So I brought all of that into Dragon's Den. And they liked it because it was on TV and they could relate to it, and they were that person. So I think that's really good training for the shy ones as well, as being able to speak in a safe, responsive environment. And then the feedback is constructive. So lots of them think that feedback is criticism. I think it's really important to make that distinction to them, that feedback's for your benefit. I'm not criticizing you at all. Um, these types of activities throw up authentic contexts. I link them with their future away from school. You can hear a pin drop when you talk, even with young children, about when they leave home and get a job. They never think they're going to leave home. So I find it's really good to get them thinking about work, because as soon as they start thinking about work, they get more engaged. It's real. Sometimes I say to them, right, today, when you do your work, I'm going to be your boss, and I'm going to tell you at the end of the day whether I'm going to pay you or not. And so they really want the money, even though there's no money. but they start working better. And I say, that's what it's like at work. You cannot goof off. You can't be slow. You can't ignore what the boss says. You're not going to be working with your friends. And that is a big shock to them. They think they will always work with their friends. So, talking about work and making it specific links with careers, I find is a really good thing, especially for those disengaged learners. It wakes them up. These types of activities also give opportunities to do public speaking and to sometimes be the host in a group. So they're supportive, which supported by their peers, which is nice. Usually the technology design process is always followed and they get so used to it when they hit, year 12 and 13, and it really matters that they've got every element there and it's done very well. And they're looking at the marking schedules and going back and analysing their work. It's not too stressful for them because they're so used to the process. They just get used to auditing their work better. And that means the teacher can open things up wide and not control everything and not worry about them because the work just naturally is thrown up. These activities also promote the key competencies. I think they're amazing. If students can do those 5 key competencies, they're going to be good people and they are going to have good lives and work well for the right reasons. So I also talk to them about intrinsic and extrinsic motivation with those students who think you should be telling them off all the time or throwing them into detention all the time, whatever it is. I say, well, look, what you actually want me to do is control you. You want me to control you. That's extrinsic of you. But the most powerful kind of control is you controlling yourself, intrinsic. So, see if you can work away on you controlling yourself so that I don't have to do it. And with the key competencies, when you've got them on the board every day, they get used to them and they just find that they start to become that person, which is really nice. Um, so here are some more benefits. The students are accountable. If they don't do the work, it doesn't happen. I'm always there as facilitator, not up the front too much. They largely self-manage, and even if they're in a group where socially they're all on the same page, there's usually a range of academic ability or desire to do well. So within the group, the pressure goes off the teacher to manage that group. They self-manage. And once when I needed this mastery thing, I was trialing it as a cycle of inquiry, and there was limited buy-in. So I thought, right, the ones who have met the standard for the first sign-off, I introduced something called the top table. You have the top table at a wedding, everybody, all the parents are up there and the bride and the groom. And I thought, oh, I'll have a top table. So when they meet the standard and they're signed off, they can go to the top table. Well, everybody wanted to be at that top table. So that was a powerful motivating force, and they were willing to get out of their social group to get to that table. And then if there were 2 left in a powerful friend group who still hadn't met the standard, because I was still saying, look, you've missed this out. Can you go back and do it and then bring it back to me? They were putting heaps of pressure on their friends, just do it, and then you can come and sit with us. So using their social connections to get learning outcomes, being creative. That's why we all go home exhausted thinking about these things. Um, all those little tips and tricks I found were really great because they took the pressure off me trying to motivate them. Their friends would motivate them and they would motivate themselves. And then the laughing at people who make a mistake stops. They get used to being very professional. They give supportive feedback. We do little shout outs at times. I used to do this thing called Notes to a Friend, and they all got a little template and they had to say 3 things that they'd really noticed about somebody in the class. And, if possible, try and do one for someone that you don't normally talk to. There's always that quiet wee one who gets missed out a little bit. It's not always about the loud, shouty ones who are the alpha male or females. It's really nice for them to get used to being kind to people who can fly under the radar a little bit. The deadline was the presentation. So it's not like, oh, it's due next Thursday, and then, half of them don't hand it in because what's the consequence? The consequence is that they can't do the presentation and everybody's sitting there wanting to hear what it is. So I can't even think of one group that didn't front up for a presentation. They really did. They loved it. It also gives you a break as a teacher, which is massive. So a big element of planning is also for my well-being, so it's not too intense. So I love it when there's one level of class has got 2 weeks where they basically take over the planning and then they present and run a lesson almost. And that gives you a little breather. If you plan it carefully, if you've got a really intense week with seniors, you can plan to have a couple of quieter weeks with the juniors where they are doing that kind of thing. And you can note those on a planner, on your yearly planner. Lots of schools are part of the school-wide positive behaviour for learning program. I don't like to do too much disciplining. I really like to reward positive behaviour. I don't give lollies. I know a lot of teachers give a lot of sugar as a reward. It's kind of like a pacifier. I think the kids know exactly what's happening, and I've just never done it, and I've never needed to. So I've got some ways that I try to reward the on-task, compliant, naturally interested and good-natured students who often don't get much time from the teacher because they're just so beautifully working away. And I don't like having negative interactions with, the students who are so used to that. Sometimes they don't know what to do when you don't do it. They test you a little bit more, but I say to them, look, you're never going to make me cry. Don't even try. I like you as a person, but some of your behavior could improve. I'm waiting for the improvement. Why don't we work together? I can find something to help you. What's your issue? Like, what's getting in the way of your learning? And sometimes they'll tell you the most personal things, and you keep it to yourself discreetly, or every now and again, I say, look, I need to tell that to a dean because nobody knows, why they're acting out. So I like to be more positive than negative. And when they see students being rewarded with teacher time, basically, for positive behavior, they want it as well. So that you get this lovely kind of vibe happening. So I do use the whiteboard to speak without speaking, just take my voice out of it. I can be a bit of a waffler, as you can see. So I use the whiteboard and I'll put up a headline, what I am seeing. I won't even tell them I'm going to do it. And I just do a list of all the positive behaviors I'm seeing in the classroom that day. And I've got some examples of things there, and they really respond to it. You can just feel the quiet start as they start to read the board, and the students who are quietly doing all the right things, they look at you and they give you this wee smile. It's like you've seen them. Sometimes they don't know if you've seen them because you get tangled up with the noisy ones or the disruptive ones, but I love giving them some attention and just making them really feel valued. And shout outs at the end are lovely as well, and I really encourage them to notice other students who aren't just their friends. And sometimes you can have a student in your class who's got a hearing issue, or um, they might have a learning disability and they don't have a teacher aide, and the kindness that starts to happen when there's a more positive tone in the classroom is really worth it. Some students are quite sensitive to noise, and in a foods room, it can get very noisy. There's a lot of hard surfaces, especially if you don't have soft close drawers and doors. I don't like people yelling from one end of the room. They never run, but they do chat away, and a happy, busy hum's fine. But if the noise level's too loud, I'm not going to shout above it. I have some kind of sound check just for the students to use. So I always tell them if it gets too noisy in here, for some of you, who doesn't like a noisy environment? And I always put up my own hand. Usually half the class will put their hand up, and I show them the chime bar, and I say, this is out here for when the noise level is getting too high and you feel uncomfortable. You can't think, or you just wish everyone would be quiet. And as soon as that is hit, everybody's got to respond. And it's so piercing. It cuts through the noise, but that empowers them, and they love coming up and just giving it one good bang. Sometimes I let them design their own ringtone so that they have different combinations of hitting it, and that's quite fun as well, just a funny element. Sometimes I bring up these free online digital clocks with funny noises. And so I let a student choose the funny noise, and the most popular one was a rooster crowing. So as soon as they heard the rooster crowing, they knew that everybody was being too loud. Um, I'll go up to a student and say, look, you've been amazing today. Would you like to choose a playlist? So they've taught me that I have to say clean, free, elementary school, and something else because I've had a couple of near misses. Um, but they love the 80s. But I also play, there's an 8 hours of birdsong or waterfalls that are free, and the images are just so restful and beautiful. And you just hear birds twittering, or you hear water rushing over a waterfall, and they match that vibe. If they're super noisy and they won't settle, I make them work in silence for 10 minutes and I put the timer on the oven. And if anybody talks, that means the whole class does another minute, and that is positive peer pressure as well. And that working in silence is something that a lot of them aren't used to. They just, especially when you're in open classrooms with multiple levels, or you've got small classrooms with big breakout spaces, there's noise all the time, and it can be quite stressful for kids. And in my room, I have a lot of positive affirmation quotes and images around the class that reinforce the school values as well. But, it could be something like a beautiful rainbow and it just says, keep going. Or I've got another one that says something like, reach for the sunshine. Like, there's another one of that little boy, you've probably seen it on a card, and he looks like a little superhero. And it says something like, being awesome takes practice, even though he's a wee superhero. So I have those things so that students can just look up and see. But I've found that another important factor when planning is the time with classes. And as Pip said, I have 12 hours a year with these kids. And when I'm used to having, hundreds of hours with students, I've had to really refine my practice. It's really made me reflect on what's essential and what is possible. I don't have a foods technician and I don't have a lot of storage. So I felt as though I couldn't do project-based learning, which I always do, even if it's introducing underpinning knowledge and skills right at the start of something. So now I do standalone topics each week. So year seven, it's all about skills. So I've got a list of equipment that I want them all to be able to use. And I've got things like the food processor, electric knife under supervision, handheld beaters, paring knives, which chopping board's the correct color, all of those sorts of things. And then in year eight, to start getting them ready for year nine, for the first three lessons, they do a little food science topic. So today I had a year eight class for the first time, the first part of a 6-week rotation, 2 hours at a time, and they made jam because they were investigating gels. So we always talk about what is a gel, where do they see gels, what's the benefit of gels, how do gels work. And I've got a little video where I show, it's a little science video showing how sugar dissolves in water, and it's got molecules graphics as well. It only goes for under 2 minutes. So they watch it once, and then the second time they watch it, they have to be able to report back to the class, each table, on something they didn't know. And every class, every table's got to do something different. And so that stops that passive consumption of a video. I usually have really short ones, but I show them twice. So I want them to tell me something they didn't notice the first time or something that they didn't know. And so that's what they did today. And they learn about pectin, what's the role of pectin, and they put in jam setting mix, which is pectin. And then they do the little test with, they give me a plate and I put it in the freezer with their initials on, and they test the jam. So we're all about testing every single week. A visual test, we use our sensors for testing. Um, they've got trays with flour, sugar, salt, and baking powder on them. And in some units, the labels have fallen off. So someone came up to me today and said, oh, Mrs. This is salt. And I said, well, if you were in a room by yourself, how would you work that out? And they had to think about their senses. I said, think about your senses. So they looked at it and it was white, like the baking powder. And they said, oh, taste it. And that's right. So then they start to think for themselves about being independent and working things out, like critical thinking is massive. But there's a little list of what I've had in the past, and every teacher will identify with this because it's so different all over the show. And that's what makes it challenging when you're planning. So then I just go back to the curriculum again. I just have a look there. you've got to listen to what your department wants, but I don't let them dictate my program because they're not the subject expert. And everything has to link to the curriculum, and I can show it to them. I just had a look at Bloom's taxonomy yesterday, the triangle, and right at the top is creativity. So some people who aren't subject specialists thinks the children should always be making something creative. The creativity is the first thing they should do. Well, it's the last thing they do. You've got to embed the underpinning knowledge and skills and the ways of thinking about things and problem solving. The creativity comes last. So I feel really sorry for students who are thrown in at the deep end. They don't know what the materials do, what the properties are of the materials. They are not confident controlling heat. They don't know how to anticipate a problem and plan to avoid it. They're not sure what else could work with that product. They're just not ready for it. So I've held off doing that where I am now because there's a wide variation in abilities coming through, and you've got that thing where they come in and just want to have fun and eat it. So I try and not do that and have the learning meaningful. So when they walk in, there's a menu, like a mini cafe menu at the door, and I've got a yellow lace surrounding it, and I always write today what you are making. So today, for another class, they were making Japanese dumplings. So it said gyoza Japanese dumplings, but underneath it, it had standardization. So that was the focus for the lesson, was standardizing the shape of the wrappers because they made the wrappers themselves and standardizing the amount of filling that went into the dumpling. And of course, that's a concept they can easily understand. And we talk about the advantages and the disadvantages of it, and that's positives and minuses. And then you come into interesting. So it can be a PMI. So I don't use that language with them yet, but they'll get that when they get to year nine, but they'll be used to working with the concept of it. Um, so if you are thinking about, oh, I'd really like to update my program a bit, or I just want to get ready for the curriculum changes, or oh, I do a lot of cooking. I would like to do a bit more theory, but make it interesting. Here are some suggestions. So I would just think about where your department is at now. So what's hard materials doing? What's digital doing? If you've got a soft materials teacher, what's she doing? If you're in a STEAM unit, what is art? What is science doing? And then work out what's not happening or what you could do to complement what they do without actually working with them. And just think about your department. Does the department want to change, or are they quite happy chugging along? Because that will tell you how well received your desire to change is going to be welcomed. And you just might slow down a little bit, or you might go and see your head of learning area and just sound a few ideas off there. Find out when they last did overhaul the program in the department. So some departments are changing all the time, which can have its own kind of stress, and others haven't changed for like 20 or 30 years. The budget's really important. You've got to know how much each child costs you and what's your operational budget. And then if you haven't had an increase in your budget for like 5 years, or last year your budget was okay, but this year they took it off, they reduced it by 10%, that's a wee bit of a tricky conversation to have, but hopefully your head of learning area goes into bat for you. So you can look at your existing units, and just so it's not too high stakes, I recommend starting with the junior ones because that's where you're going to have your foundational skills and attitudes really starting to be embedded. I was lucky enough to meet with Elizabeth Reinsfeld at Waikato, gosh, probably 14 years ago. And she said to me that by the time a student gets to year 11, they shouldn't need to know anything new about technology. They should be completely competent in all of the skills that students need to do technology. And so then they can go through senior school and they can just do their units and do them well. So that's another reason why I am quite committed to taking my teaching seriously and embedding those requirements from the matrices and the indicators of progression and the technology curriculum. The kids can do them. It's just I just find teachers back off them a little bit sometimes, or maybe rush them a little bit. And I just think it's a really careful time is year 9 and 10, and then feeding into that 7 and 8. If you're a primary school teacher, you know how busy you are and how often you are expected to change and do some new initiative. So for you, it's just maybe about trying to use some of the vocabulary with students, have a technology focus through the year. You might do a technology week or something. I'm not sure. If you're doing a community service unit, you can definitely use a technology lens for that. But do read the curriculum and try and become familiar with what it wants. Um, I like to catch up with other teachers. You always learn something from someone else. They make you feel good, especially if you've had a really busy term. And the fun factor for planning is, I think, reaching out to other teachers in person, join Facebook groups, post, comment, subscribe to newsletters. Um, Sometimes you can flip some of the donkey work with Google Classroom. If you've got your class up and running, you can give activities that have to be done before they come to class on Google Classroom, and that means you free up more time in class for activities and practical skills or even conferencing. I know that often they won't do it, but if you've got a really good relationship with those students, then you might be surprised as long as it's not too onerous for them. So I'm not sure how I'm going for time. But finally, okuhua, my friends, even though I don't meet you, I know that I'm part of this lovely community of teachers. I really value my colleagues, and even though we're all different, and sometimes we can't see, perhaps why you would want to change, or you say, "Oh, yes, that's fine for you. I don't have to do that." Of course, you don't. But we're all in it together, and we're all doing our best for these kids. I'm just a classroom teacher trying to do my best to get on and help these kids realize their potential. I love it when they feel good about their learning. I'm still learning all the time. Um, but I'm also focused on enjoying my job, and you can't enjoy your job if your students are against you. If you're trying to push something onto them and it's not working, and you start getting sick, and then it can be really downhill from there. So look for opportunities to have fun, but I got good advice years ago, which is nothing is ever just for fun. Don't ever do anything just for fun. It's always got to be meaningful learning, but it can happen in a fun way. And I just think our greatest assets are each other. And I love the culture of teaching, of sharing and supporting. And I'd like to thank TENS for this opportunity to just let you know where I've come from in my journey and how it's affected me, and how I use it still to this day. And I'm a big fan of the work that TENS does. So that's me, Pip.
Incredible. Thank you
Woo!
so much, Heather. Oh my goodness, what a wealth of information. Honestly, you
Oh.
could probably do a book, I think, on a lot of what I was busy writing notes down. And I was going to ask you some things at the end, but it's 5:04 already.
Oh my gosh,
Can you believe
unbelievable.
how we just that hour just raced by?
I
But
can't, I can't. No.
I know. I'm sure
Sorry.
there's all our participants, I'm sure, have taken away so many tips and tricks. It felt like a tips and tricks kind of
Oh, good.
webinar as well, which is
Great.
awesome. And for those of you watching, if you want to give us some feedback, there's the QR code there to give us some feedback and also to give us any ideas for future webinars. Thank you so much, Heather. I've always admired your curriculum planning, and I've had the pleasure of, having lots of discussions with you about
Yes.
curriculum, and I know you do it well. So thank you for joining
Oh,
us and sharing your knowledge. Really, really appreciated it.
oh,
Thank you
you're
so
so
much.
welcome. Thank you very much, Pip.
Thanks. And our next Wednesday webinar is taking learning to the sky. So this is all about drones, UAV in the classroom, which is unarmed, no, un, unmanned aircraft vehicles. I think it's something like that. I don't know. I'm going to go to the webinar and learn all about it. And that will be with Joe Ray and Claire Walton in May 27th from 4 till 5 p.m. So I will just close off with a karakia now. Kia mātou katoa, kua mutu mātou ia mātou mahi, ia mātou kaupapa hoki, arahina mātou. Kia kawe mātou I a mātou heipapa. Kia whakatapua mātou ki ngā kaupapa mea a whakapono. Manakitia mai mātou. Kia ora everyone, thank you so much.
Kia ora, Pip.